Greetings, one and all. As many of you who follow the channel on a regular basis will know, I play a lot of franchise mode in NHL 17. I've been playing Be a GM since NHL 11, but regarding NHL 17, I'm currently in my second series on my YouTube channel. I have a LA Kings NHL 17 franchise mode series, which is done and dusted. I'm currently doing a Columbus Blue Jackets series, and I plan on doing at least one or two more before NHL 18 comes out, because I just love Be a GM and I love franchise mode. Sure, it has its problems, but I love it. I just think being able to take control of an NHL franchise and craft it into your dream team while en route to a Stanley Cup victory is one of the most exciting things about the NHL video game series, in my opinion. Since I have played so much of this game mode over the years, I figured I would pass on some of my wisdom regarding how to take control of your team from the get-go and forge a Stanley Cup champion team as early as year 1. Without further ado, let us get on with my list of the 5 things you need to do when you start up a new franchise mode. Number 1, free agency. After you have looked at the team you have and have identified its weaknesses, always check the free agency page, especially if you have a lot of cap space to spare. There are some solid mid to low 80 rated depth players available on the free agency page right off the bat, and you'd be a fool not to use them if you need them in your team. If your team has weak depth and a solid amount of salary, take advantage of the available players. For example, the highest rated free agent when you start up NHL 17 franchise mode is James Wisniewski at 85, and there are several 83 rated wingers including Alexander Semin available to pick up. Sure, they aren't exactly as good as they used to be, and some of these guys would be more fitted within NHL 09 than NHL 17, but they would still do a good job of bolstering your bottom 6 on your team. Signing free agents beats giving up assets in a trade to acquire a similar sort of guy that you could have got without the trade. Would you rather go and pick up a guy in free agency for maybe half the money, or maybe slightly more expensive, and not have to give up a draft pick or a prospect? Or would you rather give up a draft pick or a prospect to pick up the same sort of guy you could get without needing to do that? You know, it makes perfect sense to go and get the guy from free agency if you need that sort of guy. You may have the issue of a free agent being unable to sign with you, as you may have hit 50 out of 50 contracts, especially in year 1, but that leads into my next point that you have to do. Number 2, trade dead weight contracts. Whether it's an overpaid aging veteran whose overall is rapidly going to decrease as the season goes on, or an AHL player who has no chance at all of making the NHL roster, get rid of some deadweight contracts to free up either cap space or contract slots on your team, so you can sign players who actually have a chance to crack the roster. Some guys may be hard to move, especially guys like Dustin Brown with their sort of contracts, but even if you get next to nothing or have to retain some of the salary, it's better than not being able to sign some decent players because you have some old and awful players taking up a valuable space. Most teams begin with their contract slots pretty much filled up, as I mentioned in the previous point, but freeing up these contract spots can help you land some pretty decent depth players via free agency. All you have to do is give them the space on your roster, and to do that, get rid of those awful players. You know the ones I mean, the guys that are 67 overall at 33 years old, or 70 overall at 26. You don't need those guys. Just do it. For example, I've started recently a new New York Rangers private franchise mode for myself. I'm going to try and do 25 years with the New York Rangers. And I managed to trade away 5 really awful guys, the best being Tanner Glass. But yeah, you know, Tanner Glass, he's not exactly the best player out there. But I traded like 5 prospects to the Winnipeg Jets for a 3rd round pick in the 2017 draft. That's not a bad return for 5 guys that are never going to make the NHL, or guys that you don't plan on having them play in the NHL anymore. So just do it, guys. As Shia LaBeouf says, just do it. Yesterday you said tomorrow. Today is tomorrow. Do it, guys. Number 3, check roster moves. In order to maximize the effectiveness of your roster, make sure you check the roster moves tab in Be a GM or franchise mode just before waivers kick in to ensure any aging veterans with overpaying contracts can bury as much of that salary as possible in the AHL, and you aren't leaving mid to low 80 rated young players who are eligible for junior in the juniors if you could use them on the big team. If you don't necessarily need these players for that season as you have a deep roster already, leave them in the minors to grow higher, ready for when you need them next season or the season after. Or bring them up in your current season to add some higher overall points to your group and solidify your bottom 6 group. You will feel a lot better about your franchise's situation as a GM, knowing you have put everybody where they are for a reason, and you can watch your master plan unfold, so you can tell your assistant GMs you told them so for doubting your expert judgment. Yeah, we know what you would do, Mr. Assistant GM, but are you the main GM? Did you lead your team to a Stanley Cup in year 1? Didn't think so! Number 4, fit your players into their roles. No, not like the fat roles, the fat guy swimming trunks roles. No, they're player roles. It sounds simple enough, but check the roles of each of your players and let them play in that role. If you have a player that has a role of second line forward, play them on the second line. If they are a top 6 defenseman, play them in the top 6 on the third pair. If they are a third line scoring forward or a third line checking forward, find 2 other players with the same role and make that third line either a scoring line or a checking line. It's tempting to put players in a higher or lower role based on their overall points, but if you want these players to be at peak performance and help your overall team effort, put them where their role dictates. You should do this because your players are likely to produce better numbers and gain more overall points, especially if they're younger players, if they are playing where they should be, where their role says. However, this may lead to problems, of course, as you may have a top 6 full of second line forwards, or you may have no guys that have the role of fourth line forward on your roster. But if that is the case, then it's your job as a general manager to go out and find the players to fill those gaps, either via free agency or a trade. Also, you may find some high-ceiling younger players now hitting their early 80s overall that you may want to play on your bottom 6 because you really want to get them on your team. You drafted them a year or 2 ago. You want to get them on your team as soon as possible so they can grow into the franchise forward that you always wanted. But they may have the role at that time of minor scoring forward. Take my advice when I tell you, leave them in the minors for an extra year. It will benefit that player and your happiness a lot more in the long run if you give them another year in the minors. And finally, number 5, scout and draft properly. Now, I rarely follow this advice during my franchise mode series for the sake of keeping the video somewhat interesting and keeping the momentum going. But as a GM yourself, take the time to look at where you are scouting, who are the players you are interested from where you are scouted, and almost start to create your own little draft sheet of picks you have in the draft and the upcoming draft, and the players you wish to take with them. Of course, you must always have backup picks in case the guys that you want have already gone, but it will be much easier to create a team full of amazing players that have been drafted into your franchise if you take the time to do your research. Also, line up a player's potential and their projected draft ranking. Never rely on one without the other. Your scouts may pick out a stud top 6 forward, but he's projected to go in a later round if you line both of them up. You might find a guy that's meant to be a high top 6 forward, but he's going in the 5th round. That means you don't have to worry about him until the 4th or 5th round, then you can pick him up. But if you rely on one without the other, you could overlook some solid players and end up picking a low AHL top 6 forward in the 1st round because your scout said he was a high top 9 forward. And if you haven't been paying attention or you only take your scout's word for it, that's going to happen. So make sure you take a look at both sides. Where they're projected to be drafted will help you, especially in figuring out if you should go for that guy in that round. So there you go. Those are 5 tricks you should follow when starting a new franchise mode in NHL 17. What do you think about the tips? Do you like them, loathe them, or were you doing these things already? Let me know in the comments below. I would love to know your experiences in NHL 17 franchise mode. But thank you very much for watching, guys. I hope you have enjoyed. Please feel free to like, subscribe, share, or watch some of my other videos. Thank you very much for watching, and goodbye.